My name is Charlotte Storvik, and today I'll be delivering my CAM presentation on managing creativity and innovation in the creative industries. I will be exploring how arts managers can create a sustainable environment which nurtures a creative and innovative workforce. Feel free to tweet at any time during my presentation. My Twitter name is Charlotte Storvik, as it says in the right bottom corner. So, let's take a look at what we will be covering today. First, I will define the key terms. Then, I'll provide some background on the issue. Next, I will briefly discuss how creativity and innovation can contribute to managing the changes we face. Then, I will look at the issues of creativity and innovation before I elaborate on creativity and innovation management. I will then look at factors that nurtures and hinders creativity and innovation. Next, we will explore examples of organisations which have successfully implemented creativity and innovation strategies. Finally, I will give recommendations for managing creativity and innovation and conclude accordingly. I made a timeline at the bottom of each slide to keep up with the progress as we go along. So, let's take a closer look at the key terms. Globalization is defined by the Canadian Encyclopedia Online as the process of increased integration, interaction, and interdependence of people and countries around the world. This is caused primarily by improvements in communication and transportation technology, international trade and investment, and migration. The digital shift is described by the European Policy Centre as the rapid rollout of information and communication technologies. And the creative industries are defined by the Department for Culture, Media and Sports as those industries who have their origin in individual creativity, skill and talent, and which have a potential for wealth and job creation through the generation and exploitation of intellectual property. The definition of creativity is split in two, as suggested by Margaret Bowden, professor at the University of Sussex. The first is related to innovation, where Bowden states that creativity means to think or make something new, to the individual or to the world. Second, it relates to value, where Bowden states that for an idea to be creative, it must also be useful or valuable. And finally, innovation. Sir George Cox, author of the Cox Review, defines innovation as the successful exploitation of new ideas. It's the process that carries them through to new products, new services, new ways of running business, or even new ways of doing business. Metaphorically, you may say innovation is the tip of the iceberg in the creative process. The definitions of each of these terms are in many cases contested, and there are countless other definitions out there. The definitions of creative industries, creativity, and innovation in particular are widely debated. This is subject to a whole separate presentation. So, let's have a quick look at the context. Over the past decades, the world economy has changed at a tremendous rate. With the decline of traditional manufacturing industries, we now live in a globalized world where constant information and new technologies shape the way we live and work. Today, we can communicate with people from all over the world, share information and ideas with each other, as well as exchange services and products globally. Dr. Chris Bilton, professor at Warwick University, says, "Today, the economy is based on ideas, knowledge, and information, rather than the exchange of goods and services, also known as a knowledge-based economy. In this economy, the primary assets are knowledge and education, also known as human capital." To demonstrate how the economy has changed as we have moved past industrialism, we will take a look at some contrasts of what has been and what is today. What used to be traditional manufacturing is now human capital, a job for life and a life full of jobs, tangible assets and intangible assets, accountants rule, innovators rule. Technology supports change and technology drives change. Industry rules used to be etched in stone, whilst they're now scribbled in quicksand. In addition to all of this, the Western world is facing a declining economy. Now, these changes affect all service and products-based industries, but today we will look at how it affects the creative industries. So no matter what area you work in, if it's dance, if it's music, theatre, or fine art, the recommendations made today will apply to all of you. Additionally, the recommendations can be transferable to other product and service-based industries. But first, what implications have the globalization and digital shift brought upon the creative industries? Firstly, there's greater competition for funding and audiences. The recession has led to funding cuts, meaning that many arts organisations have been forced to closure. Second, the digital shift has opened for many opportunities, but also challenges. The internet has allowed new platforms for cultural consumption. For instance, illegal downloading services like Pirate Bay and streaming services like Spotify. In addition to social media sites like Facebook and Twitter, they change the way we consume cultural products as well as contribute to making decisions towards what we consume. These are only a few of the groundbreaking new services which has emerged as a result of the digital shift. New services like these have had a great impact on how businesses communicate with their customers and develop their services and products. So, what can we do to keep up with these changes? One approach is to focus on a creative and innovative workforce. But how can this actually help us? Firstly, it can help the creative industries to compete for revenue and continue to grow in the knowledge-based economy. Additionally, it helps us see problems and issues in new ways. As Tony Proctor, professor at Chester University, puts it, creative thinking is not the universal antidote capable of curing all, but it offers way to examine problems that force us to question fundamental issues. It makes us challenge basic assumptions. In the digital age we now live in, businesses must offer ever more creative and innovative products and services. Doug Pearce, co-founder of Digital Due Diligence, says it well. Businesses, more than ever, must depend on the creative impulses of their employees to stay on the cutting edge of their industries. Companies must stay ahead of the curve by putting forward ever more innovative and creative products and service. And we can see examples of businesses who embrace these changes. National Theatre Live, Netflix, and YouTube are all examples of new and innovative ideas which explore the potential of the digital age we now live in. But how can we create an environment which allow our employees to come up with such ideas? Before we move on, we'll take a look at some of the issues of creativity and innovation. In terms of literature, Chris Bilton and Ruth Leary, professors of cultural policy at Warwick University, explain that there is especially a lack of understanding of the strategic approaches to managing creativity and innovation in the creative industries. There's a sea of various definitions of creativity and innovation. This makes it difficult to approach. I mean, how can you manage something which is so difficult to define? Additionally, there is a debate that creativity only is useful if it has purpose or value. Critics debate that useless and playful creativity sometimes is needed in the creative process. In order to get further ahead, we must allow for imagination. There is also the notion that artists and core creative workers are automatically perceived to be creative. But even though their work is classed as creative, does this mean that they work creatively and innovatively? Furthermore, there's a feeling that the emphasis on innovation and new is getting a bit out of hand. Kate Oakley, professor of cultural policy at Leeds University, is concerned with this and states, "The price to be paid for a creative economy is that the case for the arts and culture will become less about their special or exceptional difference and become diffused into the need for creativity across economy and society." This is obviously something we must consider. It's important that we don't lose focus and neglect traditional cultural values in the aim for innovation. Nonetheless, creativity and innovation appears to be the way forward in a world of increasing change and chaos. But how can we approach it? There are two ways in which we can approach creativity and innovation management. We can try to influence public policy or focus on internal processes within organizations. I've chosen to focus on the micro level, as it offers a more efficient contribution. Influencing public policy is not exactly a speedy process, and with the rate our industries are changing, we need something we can implement immediately. Another thing I must clarify at this stage is what kind of creativity I'm talking about. This presentation is focused on something called process-based creativity. This differs from focusing on individual talent and skills. The creative definition process is defined by Poincaré in 4 steps. It's preparation, where the problem is analyzed and possible sources of information and inspiration are explored. Incubation is where the subconscious mind works upon the problem while the conscious mind is temporarily resting or distracted. Illumination is the eureka moment of creative breakthrough, where the pieces in the puzzle suddenly fall into a new pattern and the solution presents itself. And finally, verification, where the new solution is tested against the original problem. This process takes place both within an individual and in teams. So the individual is obviously a part of the equation. However, by focusing on the process rather than individual talent and skills, we can enhance both the individual's and the team's own abilities. Bilton and Leary explain that in order for managers to manage creativity and innovation, they must look at the processes. If not, the organisation will suffer from polarisation. For example, many managers approach the problem of creativity by sending individual employees on a creative thinking course, rather than examining the procedures and systems within the organisation that might hinder or enliven creative processes. So, let's move on to how we can improve the level of creativity and innovation during the processes. We will do this by exploring factors that nurture and obstruct creativity and innovation, as suggested by Bilton and Leary. They wrote about this already in 2002. However, what they wrote is even more important today as the need for a creative and innovative workforce becomes increasingly important. So let's take a closer look at the factors. There are 4 main factors that can nurture creativity and innovation: motivation, risk, productivity, and flexibility. There's a feeling that those who work in the industry do it because they find the work itself rewarding. This is called intrinsic motivation. Without generalizing, there is a notion that those who work in the creative industries don't rely on the so-called extrinsic motivation in the form of rewards for cultural production, like money or praise. So, if we assume that this is the main motivation of those working in the creative industries, what can we do? Teresa Amabal, professor at Harvard Business School, suggests that managers should avoid interfering in the creative process, but that strategic targets can enhance creativity. A theatre producer uses the term deadline magic to describe how working within limits can quicken and intensify the creative process. Margaret Bowden states, the key lies in clearly defining the creative goal, whilst not attempting to prescribe the means. Setting boundaries works as a stimulus, not a barrier. The next factor we'll look at is risk. Developing an idea from concept to completed product requires a series of risks at every stage. Some of the risks require material resources, particularly at the later stage of production. However, in the earlier conceptual stages, the risk is more personal. In order to get an idea going, you must invest your own time and in many cases stake your own reputation as you get other people on board with your ideas through, for instance, pitching. Bilton and Leary suggest that the manager's role in this is to create a so-called risk space. This is where you give people the time and resources they need so that they feel free to experiment and take risks. However, Margaret Bowden argues that the creative process at least needs some boundaries. So, for instance, these boundaries can be given in a brief or announced at initial production meeting. So, the manager's role in this is to negotiate these boundaries. They may have to do with resources, expectations from clients, and organisational capacity. For instance, how many people will be allocated to specific tasks. This brief should give a clear starting point for the task, but should allow for sufficient space for innovation and experiment. As managers, we are inevitably judged by our results. We are responsible for turning creative potential into creative productivity. As we are aware of, copyright does not protect our ideas, so we must turn those ideas into something which is expressed in tangible form, for instance a TV format or a recording. This, once again, requires time and resources, even when it's not your own idea. The manager should pick up ideas that have the potential of creating some value and invest their time in testing those ideas. Bilton and Leary explain that we are now in a time where management theorists are moving beyond command and control models of leadership, and that the new knowledge-based economy requires a participatory, flexible style of management. These managers will look past the linear value chain, where ideas are developed and contested within each stage. They will create a space for collaboration in between those stages. Managers must not only communicate the ideas and needs of internal stakeholders, but also external parts. A manager's role is to broker those relationships within and between different individuals and types of thinking within the creative process. So, now that we've looked at the nurturing factors, let's take a closer look at what can obstruct creativity and innovation. Fear of failure, lack of communication, and separation between artists and managers. A lot of the projects we work with depend on collaboration between different people. The outcome depends on the ability to communicate and share ideas despite working on different fields within a project. According to Bilton and Leary, the manager is responsible for creating an open-minded space where people are invited to share ideas. Bilton & Leary tells of a design agency who sends out briefs to all workers within the organisation, even those who aren't perceived to be core creative workers, like solicitors and accountants. They're all given some time to think about the idea and then invited to share their thoughts. No ideas are dismissed until a better one comes along. This temporary shift in roles and relationships can eliminate the fear of failure. However, failure isn't all bad. Teresa Amabile explains that failure is a necessary part of the process, as mistakes lead to a better outcome in the end. As managers, we should create an environment where failure is tolerated or even encouraged. Think about how you react to new ideas. Do you allow people to make suggestions or do you dismiss them? It's about creating a relaxed space where people can feel free to share ideas and be allowed to fail. Avoid jumping directly to the value of the idea. Although it may seem like it's initially useless, it may lead to those ideas that can be successfully exploited. No idea is stupid or irrelevant. As Amabile puts it, lack of communication is a recipe for ill-informed decision-making. Managers often focus on the problem of communication with the creative team or department, rather than focusing on integrating them into the organisation as a whole. This means managers must spend time and resources in disseminating aims and objectives to artists in order to make sure that everyone is pulling towards the same direction. Bilton and Leary claim that in many organisations, core creative workers are left on their own and therefore misdirected because of the lack of communication between departments or other team members. Managerial interventions often come too late to have any useful output into the creative process. In many cases, there is a separation between artists and managers in terms of commercial objectives. Most managers have an interest in the money-making side, which artists sometimes feel reluctant to support. There is a feeling that artists think more of artistic content and dissemination rather than monetizing from what they produce. These are, of course, stereotypes of typical managers and artists, and we should be careful generalizing. Nonetheless, working together effectively and harmoniously would benefit the project or the organization. And of course, communication is an important factor here. Being able to negotiate the boundaries of the creative process and making sure that everyone is on the same page. Now, all the factors I talked about may seem quite straightforward in themselves. However, organizational structures and cultures inevitably affect how you manage your workforce. Issues like strong hierarchies, bureaucracies, and vertical organizational structures affects managers' abilities to communicate and collaborate with different departments. Additionally, cultural factors such as layout of office-scape, dress codes, and means of communication will have an impact on how you engage with your colleagues. Furthermore, there might be financial boundaries, meaning that you may not be able to spend a lot of resources on creativity and innovation management. The key is to consider how the factors mentioned can be applied to the organization or project you work with. As a manager, it is your responsibility to continuously work towards improvement, even though this may be difficult in an organization with a strict organizational structure. Now we'll take a look at a couple of organizations who have implemented successful strategies for creativity and innovation. It must be said that the success of these strategies are measured in terms of creative outputs. Without interviewing employees in the respective companies, it's difficult to comment on the internal creative processes and how they're perceived by individuals. We will explore two companies, Walt Disney and Pixar Animation Studios. In Walt Disney's creativity strategies, 3 different stages are adopted, called the NLP. The dreamer is where you dream whatever you like, you're brave to do so, and everything is possible. The realist is the part of you that gets things done and knows how to get everything planned, scheduled, and organized. You know all the details and resources needed. The critic is where you have to find out the potential obstacles and difficulties. You have to point out anything that might not work or may go wrong. Now, if we look back at the factors we discussed earlier, this model can be related to motivation in terms of boundaries, productivity in terms of evaluating the product for possible production, but also separation. There is no way of knowing if this process takes place within teams or if it's just focused on individual creativity. Ed Catmull, president of Pixar Animation, said, "We think lasting relationships matter, and we share some basic beliefs. Talent is rare. Management's job is not to prevent risk, but to build the capability to recover when failures occur. If we aren't at least a little scared, we're not doing our jobs. We're in a business whose customers want to see something new every time we go to the theatre. This means we have to put ourselves at risk. Management must set people up for success by giving them all the information they need to do the job right without telling them how to do it. Each person on a film should be given the creative ownership of even the smallest task. Once again, looking back at the factors we discussed earlier, you can see that Pixar focused on risk and failure, creating an environment where people are allowed to take risks and where failure is embraced. Additionally, one can assume that this may lead to an increased motivation, as employees are allowed to run with their ideas and follow their creative thinking. So, taking all of this into consideration, both the factors and the examples explored, what can arts managers do to create a sustainable environment which nurtures a creative and innovative workforce? As mentioned, in the new knowledge-based economy, managers are required to participate more and be flexible. Bilton and Leary call this creative management. They suggest that in order for managers to succeed in nurturing a creative and innovative workforce, they must have the capacity to tolerate contradictions, move between opposing perspectives, consider present realities as well as future possibilities, individuals and teams, organisations and systems. In other words, we must think holistically and accept that things aren't straightforward anymore. Bilton and Leary further explain that a manager should be a broker for creativity, enabling connections across boundaries and encouraging people to exchange ideas and talents to collaborate in their mutual environment. Based on everything we've talked about until now, I'll give some specific recommendations as to what we as arts managers can do. First, I think it's important we consider how we contribute to the organisational project in terms of creativity and innovation. Talk to your colleagues. Is there room for improvement? All people, teams and organisations are different, so we need to be flexible. Be open to communicating and collaborating with different people. It is essential that we're able to communicate the objectives of our work. Make sure everyone has the same starting point whilst giving them the freedom to experiment with their ideas. Think of how you react to new suggestions. Do you embrace them or do you dismiss them, and why? Take risks and allow people and yourself to fail. And finally, sustainability. In order to create a sustainable environment for a creative and innovative workforce, accept that this is an ongoing process. Everything doesn't happen straight away. It requires thought and application. Think of the factors we have discussed. Can you embed them in your organisation's culture and practice? Once-a-year exercises won't do. It needs to be permanent. Keep working towards improving the environment you work in and appreciate the needs and wishes of your colleagues. Find a strategy that works for you and your co-workers. At the end of the day, we are now living in a world which is constantly changing. New services and products arise just as fast as old ones deteriorate. As arts managers, we need to be able to handle this. By sharing our ideas and knowledge, our industries can move forward and continue to grow. In this knowledge-based economy, our colleagues and employees are our best resources. Investing time in creating the best possible environment for them to work creatively and innovatively will ultimately pay off. Thank you very much for listening.
Questions for Ida? Ida, you've hit that point of the day when nobody wants to ask questions anymore. Have you got anything? Ida, I'm going to ask a question. If I thought it was very inspiring and made me think about my management style. What's the one thing you will do as a manager to encompass some of this? I know you probably do lots of things, but what's the big thing you think you'll do?
I think the most important thing is communication. It's about knowing who the people you work with, what kind of systems they like to work within, and just like noticing the things that may hinder creativity in your organisation. Always analyse things, the way they're done and the procedures. And as I said, always think about how you can improve things. I think it's about, one thing I have to make clear is that I'm not necessarily talking about innovation in terms of, oh, we got to find this amazing new product so that we can make money off it. It's about new ways of doing things. I think that's just the way it is, really. We're in a world now where we change all the time, so we need to be on top of it. So just think about how you work with people and how you can improve.
Oh my God, loads of questions. Sorry about that, Eden. You were off the hook. Sorry.
Now in a time that people are getting made redundant and there's less money in companies and people are doing more people's jobs, do you think perhaps smaller companies that haven't got as much resources and money have time and resources to put into this, into developing creativity?
Yeah, I think definitely that may be an issue. A lot of the time during the presentation I talked about time and resources. I think if you can't invest money, then try to find the time. I don't think that necessarily it would take up too much of your time. It's about maybe even making the process just better. So as I go back to it again, it's just about thinking about it. Even when you're thinking about it, you're making an improvement because you're making a conscious effort to talk to people differently, and even that in itself may improve creativity and innovation. But yeah, I think you're right. It might be an issue in these times that people haven't got the time and the money. Definitely.
Debs, did you say question? Okay, is that everybody? Okay, thank you very much. Well done.